Welcome back to the channel, guys. So today, as promised, we're going to be doing our MiSTer tutorial, setup guide, beginner's guide, whatever you want to call it, right? Everything you need to know to get ready and rocking and playing some games with MiSTer. So the way I'm looking at it, everything's available and easy to follow along for the most part on the wiki. I'll put links in the description for everything we're talking about to make it simple for you. But myself, like many others, we like to follow along tutorials to make sure we're not missing any steps, make sure we're not doing anything wrong, and that's really why we're doing this today. You know, so many people have asked me, hey, can you do a guide on this? I'm not sure where to begin. And it's like, why not? The other part of it is it's almost advertising how easy it is to set this up. So that's the other good part of this, because so many people, you know, have seemed like, I don't know, this might be a little overwhelming, myself included. Before I got into this, I didn't really look into it too much because I was like, what am I going to get myself into? This is going to be crazy. But it's really not. You're going to be up and running in minutes. Very simple stuff. So the other thing we're going to be talking about as well is some configuration things to make sure you can get up and running in 1080p. I know I've been talking about doing a little guide on that. We're just re-recording that, putting that in this tutorial, get you guys going. So we're going to talk about what you need, how to get set up, the 1080p guide, and then also some functions within the system, because there's certain things I myself even had to learn and ask people, like with NES, on how to get my controller set up and stuff like that. So we'll touch on all that as well. So first up, the main thing we're going to need here, obviously, is the DE10 Nano board. So the board is $130. It comes with everything you need to get started. It's going to come with a power supply. It's going to also come with the 8GB micro SD card. That is definitely enough if you just want to kind of mess around with a few cores. Definitely would recommend getting a larger micro SD card if you really want to experience everything. I'm using a 128GB card. Prices have gone down drastically with these things, so yeah, I recommend getting a larger card if you want, but if you just want to mess around with this thing and kind of hold off on the additional purchases, you could be ready and rocking pretty much with everything that comes in the package with the DE10 Nano. The only thing that I really recommend getting, I mean, there's other things I recommend, but just to get started, I recommend make sure you get a USB hub. Link will be in the description for the one I use, and plenty of other people do as well. It's like $6, not a big deal. You're also going to need a keyboard, so make sure you have one handy. This is just for the initial setup and stuff like that. You don't necessarily have to have a keyboard, especially if you do get like the I/O board. We'll talk about that in a second. I use this little mini keyboard, not great for, you know, everyday use or large workloads. Like, you're not going to type an essay on this thing, but for little things like this where I just need to be able to press a few buttons here and there, I love these things. I use it a lot, use this every day. It doesn't, you know, replace my main keyboard. It's just a supplemental thing to keep things easy, wireless, and just small and out of the way. So I'd recommend one of these, but any USB keyboard is going to be fine. Now, the other thing, if you really want to experience everything MiSTer has to offer at the moment, you may want to get an I/O board. And SD RAM, definitely the SD RAM. The I/O board is just going to give you more options. You're going to get some buttons on there that make things easier and kind of make it to where you don't really need a keyboard for the most part. So definitely recommended SD RAM and I/O board. Real-time clock, stuff like that, you don't really need. I should be getting one of those pretty soon. We'll talk about its function in the future, but definitely 100% not needed. Don't need it at all. So if you don't get an SD RAM, there's going to be some cores that you can't play. So let's go ahead and take a look at those real quick. So the SD RAM board is required for these cores that we have up on the screen right now. So if you want to play NES, MSX, Game Boy, Super Nintendo, Sega Master System, ZX Spectrum, stuff like that, you will need the SD RAM. But if you just want to, you know, test out some TurboGrafx, PC Engine, Sega Genesis, the arcade games that are available on this, you don't need it. You could wait, you know, buy that later if you want to. That's kind of what I did. I just got the DE10 Nano and messed around with it, and then got the I/O board and SD RAM. The I/O board that I use has the SD RAM built into it. I'll have a link in the description for the guy I bought mine from, but definitely a highly recommended add-on to your DE10 Nano for MiSTer. Not 100% required, but it is required to be able to do everything that you want to do. So we're going to have this setup guide, and I'm not going to go through everything on here because it's better just to show it, but everything you're going to need is going to be here. And it's going to tell you, you need a Windows 10 computer, the software to set up the SD card. We need to use a Windows 10 computer, internet connection, obviously, to download the stuff we need, SD card reader on your PC, and then your micro SD card. Our DE10 Nano obviously comes with the power supply. Don't have to worry about that. USB OTG adapter plus keyboard. Like I said, the USB hub I use, link will be in the description. That way you can have your controller and a keyboard plugged in. If you get the I/O board with the buttons on it, it kind of makes it where you don't 100% need a keyboard, but hey, why not have it going and handy? So on this, it's going to tell us, okay, download the SD card installer. That's the first step you're going to need to do. You'll go ahead and click this link and it will bring you here. So any of these pages, you know, some people might have difficulty navigating through GitHub if you've never really used it before. So that's why I'm going to have everything linked specifically and marked in the description so you could follow along, grab everything you need. The way this is going to be listed, like this is the SD card installer, so we're going to want to get the latest release. The latest release is going to be at the bottom. It's going to have the release date, 2018, November 9th. That's the latest one. So you'll just go ahead and click on it. It'll bring up this page and then you'll click download. Not a big deal, very easy stuff. Now we got that, and I'm going to show this all in a moment. The next things we're going to need to get, and it's going to list down here, is going to be the update files for the MiSTer firmware. And that's going to be, once you click that link, it's going to be here. Same thing, go to the bottom, click on that bad boy, and download from here. So then the other thing we're going to need is going to be the menu to update the menu core file. So you'll click here to get to that page, and that's going to be here. Same thing, bottom of the list, the newest version. Click on it, click download. You got everything you need besides cores, and we'll take a look at how to download and install the cores in a second. So here we go. What you're going to have, this is showing uTorrent for whatever reason, but it's a RAR file. You're going to want to extract that. That is your SD card installer. Once you extract that, you're going to have this folder here with the release date, right? So you're going to open that up. So you're going to have this utility here, this application, MiSTer SD card utility. So let's go ahead and open that up. Let me get this over here. So there we go. We don't really need to mess with anything. You're just going to want to make sure you select your device. So I have the 8 GB card in my PC right now that came with the DE10 Nano. We're just going to go ahead and do a full install. So you're going to click on that. It's just going to tell you everything's going to be lost. Don't worry about that. Go ahead and click yes. It's going to go through the process. On my other screen, all this extra stuff is popping up right now that you're not seeing. I'll just bring it over. But you're going to get these little screens. You need to format the disk, blah, 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 blah. Just cancel out of those. Don't worry about that stuff. A few of them may pop up during this process, but don't worry about it. Just cancel it. Make sure you don't format anything. And once it's done, you will get this full install has finished. So now we're good. We can go ahead and get out of that and then navigate to our SD card. And it's going to now be called MiSTer Data. Pretty simple stuff. So now with this, you're going to have that menu and the firmware in there. But what we're going to want to do is actually update the menu and the MiSTer firmware. So we've already downloaded that stuff earlier. And like I said, I'll have everything very specifically linked in the description so you can find all this stuff very easily. But we're going to go ahead and copy that over, the MiSTer firmware and the menu. So I'm going to go ahead and you can just change the names to where it just says MiSTer and menu and then let it overwrite. But I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to delete the old two. Boom. Permanently delete them bad boys. Go in here and rename. And pretty much I'm just deleting the release date information that's on there. If you change anything else, it's not going to work. So make sure you leave it exactly as such. MiSTer and menu. So from there, you can go ahead and take your SD card out and actually boot up your DE10 Nano and get to the MiSTer, menu. You're not going to have any games or anything, obviously, because you haven't installed any cores or put games on there. And we're going to do that in a second. But the other thing I want to touch on while we're sitting here on the SD card is the 1080p stuff, the configuration stuff. So right now, these are the only files and folders that we have on this card. Once you've booted up, it'll actually produce some more stuff. It'll make a config folder with a MiSTer.ini, ini, whatever you want to call it, file. That's going to initialize everything, give you all your configurations once you boot up. The system will just create a default one that doesn't have any options going. But let's go ahead and just create that folder. You can do this now if you want. You can download the MiSTer.ini from the website and manipulate the things as you choose and then just copy it over now. Or you can go back and change these settings later. But we're just going to name this folder config. Boom. And then I'm going to go ahead and take this over, the MiSTer.ini, and put it in the config folder. Like I said, that'll just automatically happen once you boot up. But just for sake of saving a little bit of time, I'm just doing it this way to showcase that. So let's go ahead and open this. I'm going to edit with Notepad++. And this is everything that you're going to have here. So there's going to be certain things that you could change and mess around with. I've taken some notes from plenty of people who've explained to me how certain things work here. But what we have, if you want to get 1080p, the main thing is going to be this video mode down here. The default's going to be 0, so it's just going to say 0, and that's going to give you 720 at 60 frames or 60 hertz. If you want 1080p, you're going to want to change that to an 8, which is what I had it at now. Now, there's a few other things people had told me to do. The V-scale integer, put it to 1, set to 1 to use only integer vertical scaling. And then down here, the VSync adjust, people have recommended to me to set it to 1, but you have to be wary with that because some monitors or displays, it may not work properly. But there if you change it to 1 and it doesn't display properly, just change it back to 0. But using it, setting it to 1, it's going to use the original console's refresh rate. But it could be incompatible with certain monitors, so just keep that in mind if you change that. There's plenty of other options in here to mess with things, like if you're doing, composite VGA stuff. There's things to mess with. We're not going to touch on that at this time. I think these are the main important ones. So once you've changed that, just go ahead and save, and you'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and get out of that. Pretty simple stuff. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do actually is getting some cores, right? So what we're going to want to look at, back on the setup guide or on the main wiki page, you're going to have the cores listed over here. And there's a bunch of them, like I said. Here's all our consoles, and then here's all our computer-based systems, and then down here's the arcade stuff. Later on, I'll do a tutorial specifically for arcade stuff because it's definitely a little more complicated than anything else. But today, we're just going to start and do Super Nintendo, the newest core that was thrown up. So we can go ahead and click on that. And then when you look at any of these cores, there's going to be a bunch of files. Like I said, it could be overwhelming to some people, but it's really not. You're just going to want to go to releases. And with some cores, there's going to be more releases, obviously. With the Super Nintendo core, this is the first public release, so there's nothing else here. But you're just going to want to look for that latest release date, and they're going to be RBF files. So we'd go ahead and click on that. Do the same thing like earlier and download. So we've got it. I've already downloaded it. It is on my desktop. So now you can kind of tidy up your SD card and make file or folders and whatnot, directories, to make things a lot easier. And I've kind of shown how my card is set up. But if you want, here's the Super Nintendo core. You can just drag it and drop it to this main menu or this into the root of the card, and it'll just show up in your main menu once you boot up the system, and you can select that core. Or you can go ahead and like make a folder and put all your, let's say, console cores, something like that, and then just put them in there. And then, you'll have those folders once you boot up the system, and you can go in here and select, just to make it neater, instead of having every core listed and you're scrolling through a bunch of, names and whatnot. It's easier to do it with folders. So that's one thing. The other thing, once you, get your games going, you put your games on here. The thing I would say too is also make a folder. So we'll do SNES games, or you can name it ROMs. It doesn't matter. Just something, easy for you to identify. And then with our games, I'm using the Smoke Monster EverDrive packs. I think these might be a little bit older ones, but it doesn't really matter. Everything in these, the way they're formatted, is ready to go for MiSTer. But if you already have ROMs, that's on you. I'm not directing anybody where to download anything as far as ROMs go. But I'm going to go ahead and just take, let's just say this A through E. I'm going to put it in that Super Nintendo ROMs folder. It'll take a minute to transfer over. The one thing, you're going to want to make sure all your games are not zipped. They have to be just the base file, and then you'll be good to go. As you see here, nothing is zipped. They can't be zipped, otherwise the system's not going to recognize it. So now that that's transferred over, we're going to go ahead and switch to the MiSTer. Okay, so this is pretty much what your screen should look like. I had learned later on, after really messing with this, how to change the background, because YouTube video encoding does not like the default background, which is the static. So like I said, you're going to want to have your keyboard plugged in. If you want to change the static, which, let me find it. It normally would look like this, and this is a nope for YouTube especially, and it might kind of mess with your eyes a little bit. You just hit F1 on your keyboard to cycle through different backgrounds. I just leave mine to black. Now the other thing before you really get started is you're going to want to hit F12 on your keyboard. So with that, you're going to want to remap everything for your keyboard, make sure everything is good. So you'll just hit enter on there and then just follow the prompts, define everything. If you have a controller plugged in, you can do the same for the controller, but you're going to want to do that specifically for each core to make sure it recognizes the controller properly, and that's pretty damn easy as well. So let's go ahead and get out of that. Now, once you've set up your controls, set up your keyboard, you can navigate through the menu here. So with certain systems, there's going to be different options for everything. The one that I want to point out that some people who jump into this might have an issue. I had an issue initially, and I know other people did as well, and I reached out and I was explained Todd's Nerd Cave. He hit me up and said, hey, you have to do this. So I want to show that real quick just to save some people some heartache. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter on the NES core. And your screen's going to go black unless it auto loads a game. Like this was the previous game I played, but what you're going to want to do is hit F12 on your keyboard. Now, to set up your controls, what you're going to want to do is you can go left and right on this screen. Once you've hit F12, you got the NES screen and then the system screen. So you're going to want to go to define joystick buttons. So let's go ahead and hit enter on that. I am using the Bliss box and I'm using Super Nintendo controllers right now. So let me hit enter on that. It's going to prompt me to press the button. So I'll hit right, left, down, up, A, B, select, and start. And now we're good. There's going to be one other thing with NES anyway, is you're going to want to set swap joysticks to yes. That's pretty important. Otherwise, things are going to be wonky for some reason. I'm not 100% why that works, but that's what I was told, and that's what I did, and I have no issue. So set swap joysticks to yes, and then go down here to save settings, hit enter, hit A, whatever, you are good. So now with each system, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the main menu here. I don't want to do an NES game, but I have the I/O board and I have those three buttons there. So instead of pressing F12, I just hit the middle button and it took it off, or it brings it up. So on this system screen, you can go to load core. So I'm going to go ahead and select the SNES one. It's going to bring me back to a black screen with nothing on it. Either hit F12 if you have the I/O board, hit that middle button, and it'll bring up your system core options. So with that, every system's going to have where it tells you to load, and that's where you're going to select your ROMs. So as you see, there's no zip file up there. It's telling you the file extensions that you can use to load Super Nintendo games. And then you will have some other options here that you can mess with. Aspect ratio. You can mess with some of these things in the game, so you don't really have to worry about that. But that was the one thing I didn't point out. The ROM header, they have it to auto now, so that's pretty good. But you can also go back through and select it. But I think that's cool. You have auto now. You don't have to select the ROM header to load games. But what you'll do, and like I said, every core is going to be pretty similar. You'll just go ahead and load game. And as you see, I have that pack here, which on the card that I demoed, I just put the A through E stuff, but I have everything else on here. And you'll just hit A or hit enter, find a game. I mean, why not, right? And then hit A or enter on your keyboard, and your game will load up. Now, as you see, we have that display up there. We're in 1080 right now. I'm going to go ahead and hit that core button, the OSD button, whatever it's called, to get to the selections here, the settings that we have. You can you go to them and then you press A. So we got 16:9 or 4:3. Scan doubler FX. You have some filters, some CRT stuff going on. Video region you can go through and change. If you want, you can go ahead and define your buttons, which is definitely recommended you do. So we're going to go ahead and define the Super Nintendo buttons, which I've already done, but might as well show you. Right, left, down, up, A, B, X, Y, L, R, select, and start. And then we're good. I'll just go ahead and save settings. And now we're good. If you're using the same controller every time you load up, you have to do nothing. It's very nice that it guides you through that way. That way you know exactly what buttons are what, and you are good to go. So as you see, everything's running. This is a very, it's an early core, but it is a public core, so that's a cool thing. Definitely hope you guys enjoy messing with this. If you have any questions, throw out some comments. Let me know what's up. I hope this helped and kind of provided all the basics you need to know to get started in gaming. I think I may do another video later on showcasing the Bliss Box with MiSTer, because I think it's really an awesome add-on, especially if you're going to take this really seriously and get into MiSTer for playing your old school games. It allows you to use original controllers for tons of systems. That's how I'm using an original Super Nintendo controller at this time. But you can have it where you can swap through, PC Engine, TurboGrafx, NES, Sega Genesis, to your heart's desire to play the games the way you want. I think it's an awesome accessory. It is a little expensive, but definitely one that I'm really enjoying using with MiSTer. So there you go. Hope you guys appreciate it. I'm getting my ass handed to me here. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Bam! Make sweet love to that notification bell. Really do appreciate you guys hanging out with me. And with that said, guys, I will catch y'all next time. Peace out, bye-bye, and boom.